In December 2017, the New York Times published a story that should have ended every government denial about unexplained phenomena. For 4 years, the Pentagon had been running a classified program funded with $22 million in black budget money to study one of the strangest pieces of land in the United States. The program was called AAW SAP. The land was Skinwalker Ranch, and the 38 research papers it produced are, to this day, almost entirely classified. Most Americans have never read a single line of them. But throughout 2026, that has started to change. Documents have been emerging from the Defense Intelligence Agency archive. Researchers who worked on the program have been speaking more openly than at any point in the last 14 years. And what they're now describing in interviews, in books, in slowly declassified excerpts is the same story the Ute tribe has been telling for hundreds of years about the land in northeastern Utah. This is what we now know. It started with a senator. In 2007, Harry Reid of Nevada, Senate Majority Leader, one of the most powerful men in Washington, began quietly working to secure classified funding for the study of what he described as advanced aerospace threats. But the threats Reid was describing weren't from Russia or China. They were anomalous, unexplained. The kind of phenomena the US government, on the record, had been denying existed for 60 years. Reid had a friend, the wealthiest man in Nevada and one of the most outspoken believers in non-human intelligence on Earth. His name was Robert Bigelow. And in 2008, the Defense Intelligence Agency awarded $22 million to Bigelow's company, Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies, to conduct what came to be known as the Advanced Aerospace Weapon System Applications Program, AAWSAP. For 4 years, the program ran in the shadows. It produced 38 separate research papers, classified internally as Defense Intelligence Reference Documents. The titles of some of these documents are now public, and they read like science fiction. Traversable wormholes, stargates and negative energy, warp drive, dark energy, and the manipulation of extra dimensions. Anomalous, acute, and subacute field effects on human and biological tissues. These aren't theoretical exercises, these are signed, dated, official Pentagon research papers, funded by US tax dollars, stamped by a federal agency, sitting in classified archives right now. In 2017, when Robert Bigelow appeared on 60 Minutes, Lara Logan asked him point blank whether he believed in aliens. His answer was unambiguous. He said he was absolutely convinced of their existence. He said they were already here, and he said the United States government already knew it. The question every viewer should be asking is this: what did Bigelow see on a 480-acre cattle ranch in northeastern Utah that made him say that on national television? Skinwalker Ranch sits in the Uinta Basin of northeastern Utah. 480 acres of pasture, low hills, and a stone mesa locals have avoided for hundreds of years. The Ute tribe, who have lived in this region for centuries, have a specific name for the land. They call it the Path of the Skinwalker. Their elders will tell you, on the record, that the land is cursed. They will tell you they do not go there. And they will tell you that the people who do don't always come back the same. In 1994, a man named Terry Sherman moved his family onto the property. They were ordinary people, cattle ranchers, 2 adults, 2 children, a dog. Within months, things began happening they could not explain. Cattle mutilated with what appeared to be surgical precision, eyes removed, organs taken cleanly, no blood at the scene, no tracks anywhere on the ground. Lights in the sky that hovered above the property divided into smaller lights and disappeared. A creature their teenage son saw, walking on 2 legs through the trees, watching the family from a tree line they could see from their kitchen window. 20 months in, after 14 head of cattle were lost. And after one final incident, the Shermans have never publicly described in detail. They sold the property in 1996 to Robert Bigelow for $200,000. The Shermans have given exactly 2 on-the-record interviews in the 30 years since. Terry Sherman has refused to set foot on the property again. Whatever happened in those last weeks of 1996, whatever the final incident actually was, Terry Sherman has spent 3 decades not telling that story. What did he see? After buying the ranch, Bigelow formed the National Institute for Discovery Science, NIDS, and brought in PhDs, Colum Kelleher, a biochemist, George Knapp, the investigative journalist who would eventually break the story to the public, a rotating team of physicists and intelligence veterans. From 1996 to 2004, NIDS staff lived on the property in shifts. They documented hundreds of incidents in their internal logs. In 2005, Kelleher and Knapp published Hunt for the Skinwalker. The book described in detail, on the record, with named scientists corroborating events that would later make their way into Pentagon study documents. Orbs of light that materialized in front of NIDS observers and intercepted moving vehicles. Cattle that vanished from secured pastures with no tracks leading in or out. One incident in which a NIDS team reported watching a creature climb out of what they described as a tunnel of yellow light suspended in mid-air above the ground. Equipment that died at the moment of incidents and resumed functioning seconds after the phenomena ended. These accounts are sourced, they are in print, they are signed by their authors, and they were the foundation AAW-SAP was built on. In 2021, 14 years after the New York Times broke the story, the man who actually ran the Pentagon program, James Lakatsky, co-authored a book with Kelleher called Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. It was the first time the DIA program manager himself had spoken publicly about what AAW-SAP found, and what Lakatsky described was something neither he nor Kelleher had ever fully written down before. They called it the hitchhiker effect. The phenomena, they wrote, did not stay on the ranch. They followed the researchers home, affected their spouses, affected their children, manifested in the homes of people who had visited the property and then left. That is in print, from the man who ran the program. It is not speculation. So why is this story breaking open right now? Because the FOIA releases haven't stopped. They've accelerated. Throughout 2024 and 2025, journalist John Greenewald, who runs the Black Vault, the largest public archive of declassified intelligence documents in the United States, filed dozens of requests for AAW-SAP material. Some of those requests have been granted, slowly, page by page. Through 2026, additional excerpts have been pulled out of the Defense Intelligence Agency archive that researchers had been waiting on for years. What has emerged is incomplete, heavily redacted, often missing the exact pages researchers wanted most. But the picture is coming into focus. Of the 38 DIRDs produced under AAW-SAP, the bulk of them remain classified, not because the science in them is sensitive, but because, according to the language used in the redactions, releasing them in full could compromise sources, methods, and operational programs still active at the Department of Defense. Read that line again. Operational programs still active at the Department of Defense. The program was supposedly terminated in 2012. There are other questions. AAW-SAP was officially about advanced aerospace threats, but the documents that have surfaced go far beyond aerospace, wormholes, consciousness, tissue effects from proximity to anomalous phenomena. The DIRD on biological field effects documented dozens of catalogued cases of human injury burns, internal bleeding, lasting neurological damage in people who had been near anomalous incidents. That report is signed. It is real. You can read its title page right now on a public website. So here is what the 2026 conversation keeps circling back to. Why was a Pentagon program nominally about aerospace threats, spending taxpayer money studying biological injury from paranormal exposure? Why is the majority of the program's output still classified 14 years after the program officially ended? Why has the only person who has spoken openly, James Lakatsky, the man who ran it, confirmed that the phenomena followed researchers home, but refused to name a single one of the people affected? And the question that has driven 2026's renewed scrutiny harder than anything else: if AAW-SAP found nothing. If Skinwalker Ranch is just folklore and coincidence, then why does the Pentagon in 2026 still refuse to release the medical evaluation data from researchers who, by the program's own internal documentation, came back sick? These are not conspiracy theorist questions. These are questions being asked in writing by working journalists with active FOIA cases. Listen carefully to what the men who actually worked the program will and won't say. Colm Kelleher, the lead biochemist at NIDS and co-author of both major books on the subject, has done dozens of podcast interviews. He uses careful language. He acknowledges that phenomena he cannot explain occurred on the property. He acknowledges in his own writing that effects followed researchers off the ranch. But when interviewers press him for specific incidents involving specific people, Kelleher's response is always the same. He cannot share that. The agreements are still active. James Lakatsky, in the few public appearances he has given since 2021, has been even more cautious. He confirms the program existed. He confirms what is in his book. When asked what is still classified, he says only that the most significant findings remain at a classification level he cannot discuss. He never raises his voice. He never speculates. He simply declines to answer. George Knapp, the investigative journalist who has spent more time on Skinwalker Ranch than any other reporter in the country, has been more direct. He has stated publicly on multiple occasions that the most disturbing material from the NIDS years was never included in Hunt for the Skinwalker because the witnesses refused to be named, and Knapp would not publish it without sources. He has said, in his own words, that what is in print is the polite version. What does the impolite version contain? What did NIDS researchers see in those 8 years that made them, 2 decades later, still unwilling to put their names to it? The 2026 FOIA releases may eventually tell us. The participants will not. AAWSAP was terminated in 2012. Its successor, AATIP, ran until 2017. In 2020, the Pentagon established the UAP Task Force. In 2022, that became AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the Pentagon's current and public UAP investigation unit. Each program has been smaller, more visible, and more carefully managed than the one before it. But none of them, not AATIP, not the UAP Task Force, not ARO, has ever publicly investigated Skinwalker Ranch. The official position is that the ranch was a private research project, not government business. Then, in July 2023, a former intelligence officer named David Grush testified under oath before a House Oversight Subcommittee. Grush told Congress, under penalty of perjury, that the United States government had recovered non-human craft and non-human biological material. That programs to study these materials had been operated outside congressional oversight for decades, that he had been retaliated against for trying to disclose what he knew. Grush was not a conspiracy theorist. He was a decorated intelligence officer with active clearances. His testimony has never been formally rebutted by the Pentagon. In the months since, more whistleblowers have come forward. Throughout 2025 and into 2026, public pressure for full UAP disclosure has reached the highest level it has been at in 50 years. The disclosure pattern is consistent. The Pentagon does not disclose. It permits disclosure slowly, carefully, on its own schedule. The Skinwalker files are, by all appearances, on that schedule. For 3 decades, Skinwalker Ranch has been treated as fringe, a reality TV setting, a Western tall tale. The documents we now have, the books in print, the FOIA releases trickling out across 2026, the testimony being delivered under oath in Congress, say otherwise. Skinwalker Ranch was the central test site for the most secretive program the US government has ever publicly admitted to running on the subject of unexplained phenomena. And the questions the Pentagon refuses to answer in 2026 are the same questions the Ute tribe has been answering for hundreds of years. What do you think is on the pages that haven't been released yet? Drop your theory in the comments. We're going deeper next week into the specific NIDS era incidents that George Knapp has refused to publish, and what we now know about why. Make sure you're subscribed. The next case is already waiting.